Good evening, everybody. I am glad to see so many people joining us. We've got a bunch of people coming in. My name is Susan Bowden, and I am the Digital Outreach Coordinator for the Archaeological Conservancy. If you're joining us as a member of the Conservancy tonight, thank you. Your support makes our work possible. If you are coming in as someone new to the Conservancy, let me share a little bit about our organization. The Conservancy is the only national nonprofit organization that identifies, acquires, and preserves the most significant archaeological sites in the United States. We've been doing this work for 44 years, and in that time, we've preserved almost 600 different sites across the nation. And these sites represent a broad spectrum of time periods and cultures. 6 months ago, we launched a brand new website, and if you haven't seen it, please watch the chat. I'll be dropping the link here shortly so that you can go visit. I think you'll enjoy reading the highlights and excerpts from our quarterly magazine there. And just in case you weren't aware, we have a new issue of the magazine dropping on September 1st, which is Sunday. You also can explore an interactive site map and discover some in-person and virtual events that we are offering. Before we get started tonight, I'd like to share a few reminders. First of all, please feel free to ask questions. I've warned Dr. Garfinkel that he's going to have to handle some questions at the end, and we want to make sure that yours doesn't get missed. If you look at the very bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A. That's where you can put your question, and we will address them toward the end of the presentation. If you're having technical difficulties with sound or video, you can try heading over to our YouTube page where we are live streaming right now. And also, we are recording tonight's lecture, and it will be on our YouTube channel sometime tomorrow. So if you missed part of the lecture, or if you want to share it with friends or family, I'm sure that Dr. Garfinkel would love to know that his words are going beyond just tonight. So you can watch there, and I will be sending an email out to you to let you know that it is loaded and ready for you. So with that, my portion is finished. I'd like to introduce to you Lindsay Lafayette. Lindsay is the regional field representative for the Western region and has worked with Dr. Garfinkel. Corey Wilkins, who is our regional director, is on vacation, so he's not with us tonight, but he did send his regards to you also, Alan. So Lindsay, I'm going to turn it over to you so that you can introduce Alan for tonight.
Okay, thank you, Susan. This is Dr. Alan Garfinkel. How are you tonight, Alan? Oh, you're muted if you'd like to take your mute off.
Got it.
You got it. Great. Dr. Garfinkel has been a longtime supporter of the Archaeological Conservancy, but I first met him in December of last year when he offered to give me a tour of a prospective preserve. In return, he asked me if I could show him a petroglyph panel at our nearby Portuguese bench preserve. And in return, he asked me if I could show him a petroglyph panel. I'm sorry, that's a Portuguese bench preserve. Excuse me, I'm repeating myself. During this panel's visit, I could tell he was struck by its uniqueness, and afterwards he sent us a de-stretch image and an amazing pencil sketch, both of which really bring out the detail in the figures. Since Dr. Garfinkel has been studying rock art in Eastern California for decades, I'm excited to have him here to discuss the Portuguese bench petroglyph panel and how it relates to others in both time and space. So thank you, Dr. Garfinkel, for joining us tonight.
I'm honored. Thank you, Archaeological Conservancy, and thank you, Lindsay. Pleasure.
So Alan, let's get your slides shared before you start talking. Do you need some help talking through that, or you got it?
No, how do we get our slides back up again?
So go down to the bottom of your Zoom window and click on that share button.
Oh, okay.
Perfect.
And then just click on the picture, huh?
You got it.
Excellent.
And we're seeing it. Looks great.
Fantastic. So this is my presentation. I've modified it slightly to incorporate the new information we have from the Portuguese bench site. And I call it the Ancient Uto-Aztecan Iconography and Sacred Narrative from the Coso Range. I've been studying Coso rock art and also the regional prehistory of this area of Eastern California for about 50 years now. So if you see these images here, They may be striking because they're rather representational and naturalistic. And what seems to be the case is there's symbolic parallels in this Coso Range iconography, which I believe are analogs, similar to the ancient Uto-Aztecan religious mythology and sacred narratives that are characteristic of those cultures, both in the American Southwest and in Mesoamerica itself. There's multiple researchers have suggested that there's an early Uto-Aztecan origin in the far west, or Uto-Aztecan, perhaps even a homeland about 4,000 years ago. And what we find is this Coso snake-associated bird-woman religious tradition may have distant ties and prefigure a much later Mesoamerican fluorescence that is associated with a lunar Earth Mother complex with strong serpent-themed designs. Supporting that contention is Coso Rock Art that appears to have a very similar story to tell and depicts a key sacred creation narrative characteristic of the Huichol as well as the Nahua or Uto-Aztecan people. The image on the screen from Big Petroglyph Canyon in the Cosos, and this is of a pregnant woman, and you can tell it's a woman by the pendant labia, and of course the bulbous torso, and you can see the indication of her, characteristic. She's carrying the seeds or the rain, and in essence, associated with the creation of those phenomenon. Here's that panel from Portuguese Bench. Portuguese Bench is on the eastern skirt of the far southern Sierra Nevadas. Not technically even in the Coso Range. It's outside of the Coso Range, but just barely. It's about 5 or 10 miles north of Little Lake. And for those listening in from all over the country, the Coso Range is in the southwest corner of the Great Basin, Eastern California, Inyo County, and it's known in all throughout the world as being one of the greatest proclivities, the greatest concentration of rock art in one small area anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. There's approximately 200,000 individual images in a 10 by 10, 10 mile by 10 mile, 100 square mile area. Here's this densely textured symbolic narrative, and it's rather remarkable. I have rarely, if ever, seen any sort of panel is so celestial and so cosmic and have stars and other significant elements within that panel. You'll see at the top, at the very top of this panel, this small and rather diminutive Earth Mother animal mistress. That's a female. She has pendant labia, and she's holding a rattlesnake. I know it's a rattlesnake because it has a triangular head and also a wand. Her face is that of a star, providing an unmistakable signal that she's really a night sky being. And you'll see there's snakes all throughout this entire figure. There's a snake here, a snake above, a snake over here. Here, these are symbols of fruition, fertility, rain, etc. There's two classic Coso sheep off to the right of this figure. There are projectile points peppered throughout this figure. This is the largest one. And I found in the Cosos that the depiction of uh, projectile points, these are dart points, only occur during what's called the late Newberry period. And it occurs during this time span from about 500 BC to about AD 1. That's about 2,000 to 2,500 years ago. And the projectile points that they are depicting are the Elko series and Humboldt series that are found characteristically in the Great Basin. What we see here again, we have a characteristic and emphasis on both solid and pattern-bodied animal-human figures during this time span. You'll notice that up here, you'll see there's an S-shaped snake, and there's also this zigzag-shaped snake. And these are represented as associated with this snake mother supramundane being. Also, the star-like face is unusual. I haven't seen any other figure anywhere in the Cosos that has a star-like face. But this particular being is very characteristic, and I've written very extensively about being an animal mistress or a supernatural guardian of the animals and Earth Mother. And in this case, what we have found is there's a lunar goddess figure probably represented here in this particular panel. There's stars all throughout this panel. You can see them. A lot of them are very small, but there's some large stars. There's some bigger stars down below. I haven't seen that anywhere else in the Cosos either. And there are 3 anthropomorphs, animal-human figures in this panel, and they're all females. They all have female genitalia. And this also is a common characteristic of the panels of figures that are found in the Coso Range during this particular time span. And we believe that it's associated with these ancient Uto-Aztecan myths and sacred narratives, which of course support models favoring great antiquity for the Uto-Aztecan people and language group found in that particular area. So we have these ancient Uto-Aztecan narratives, similar characteristics. Here's some relevant Coso rock art discoveries that are found in the Newberry period. But not only in the Newberry period, but in the earlier period called the Mojave, that is significantly earlier, from about 6,000 BC to 2000 BC. See this fluorescence of these decorated animal-human figures, some that are done in exquisite detail. Now, this is very unusual. Throughout the Great Basin, you do not see this characteristic set of female figures that are as ornately dressed or expressed. And so this really brings up a lot of interesting and complicated and probably controversial questions. Down below, if you can see it, this is an enormous snake. It's a female snake. Those are Hopi-like hair whorls on her face. That occurs in Little Petroglyph Canyon. And here's some characteristic figures of pattern-bodied anthropomorphs with concentric circle faces, characteristic pattern designs, and the fringe at the base of them. So when you look at Uto-Aztecan, here's the distribution of Uto-Aztecan in North America and in Mesoamerica. And if you look at Proto-Uto-Aztecan, the Numic languages are actually a part of it. Numic languages are those in the Great Basin. The Paiute and Shoshone speak what's called a Numic language. Hopi is also a Numic language, as is Aztec and Huichol. So the comparative and historical linguists have also evaluated this time depth, and they believe that There's 5,000 to as much as 9,000 years of time depth from the time of this Proto-Uto-Aztecan inception of this particular language group. Michael Morato, who's a rather prestigious character, he was the chair of my dissertation committee, believed that lexicostatistical dating or glottochronology shows that there's a hypothesized relationship between the California Indian languages of Uto-Aztecan, which are found throughout Southern California and into the Western Great Basin. Some scholars believe that we see a 4,000 or 5,000 year time depth for these languages in North America. And Catherine Fowler wrote a seminal paper back in 72 and 83, pointing to this area, which includes the Coso Range, as the geographical heartland of the Proto-Uto-Aztecan people. Here's the Coso Range. That's the north base. Here's what it looks like from the air. And it certainly is covered with a lot of volcanic material, which was the canvas for these remarkable rock drawings. Now in the uplands, which there isn't much of, at about 8,000 feet in the Pinion Zone in the Cosos, there's a remarkable panel, a rock art panel, a petroglyph, that has two solid-bodied avian human figures that are holding snakes, one in each hand, and have Elko series projectile points emanated from their heads. This again shows a similar kind of phenomenon as we've said before. This S-shaped snakes are a characteristic of ancient and archaic Uto-Aztecan, and they represent both atlatls, dart throwers, and the principle of fertility and the production of rain. So we have quite a diversity of these animal human figures, and sometimes they have feathers, and it's rather obvious that some are quail plumes. So they may be solid or decorated, and often they are conflated or intersected with snakes. So here's a snake woman here in this picture. Here's a smaller figure holding a snake. Here's a snake coming out of a hole. Here's a snake going down in a hole. Here's one of these decorated animal human figures with the avian legs and feet birthing a snake. And here's a headdressed, a bighorn sheep headdressed individual holding a snake with avian legs and avian feet. Now, as much as this seems far-fetched, let me tell you another story, and that is one of my colleagues, Carolyn Boyd, who's a very prominent researcher in rock art, produced a landmark book on what's called the White Shaman site. In that White Shaman site in South Texas, she in fact showed that there was a dominant female with snakes, and she reconstructed that that particular figure and that panel was in fact an equivalent diagram of the same creation story as the one that I have recognized in the Coso Range. And this is part of what's called the Pecos tradition. So these S-shaped snakes are weapons. Sometimes they're represented as ceremonial atlatls, but they represent lightning, serpents, and the constellation of Ursa Major. But also they are associated with what's called the lunar goddess or a moon goddess. And at the base of the mural in Little Petroglyph Canyon, there's 5 interesting figures. Show you. So here's the figure itself that's de-stretched. That's a particular strategy to bring out the rock art and see it better. And there are 5 figures standing with hands up in the air. And there is a lowermost figure holding a snake and a wand. And there's a crescent moon. And I believe below, underneath of this is a sun-like symbol. So the way this goes is that these 5 ancestor figures followed the lunar goddess at the time before time when there was no sun. And the way they did this, they were walking in a particular way towards a sacred mountain. For the Huicholos known as Dawn Mountain. They went to earth or create the sacred fire. One of them had to jump in and become a sacrifice if they were to create the sun. Well, 4 of these, individual beings that were going on this pilgrimage were too scared to go in. But this larger being up at the top here decided that he had the courage and jumped into the fire and committed a sacrifice. Let me go back up here. So what happened after that sacrifice was that sacrifice created the sun, but the sun wasn't strong enough. It didn't have enough energy to sit in the heavens, and it would move up higher and freeze the earth, or it would move down low and burn up the beings and the flora and fauna that existed on the earth. So the 5 primordial pilgrims were needed to, at the 4 corners of the globe, to push up the earth, to push up the clouds so that the heavens could be high enough, and then the sun would have its rightful place in the cosmos. And if you'll see here, these are cloud-like representations. And these clouds, as they would come together, would be called a cloud serpent. And again, this would represent the coming of the rains, and they would be responsible for creating fertility in the earth. Now, some of these figures are elaborate, very elaborate. And here's a quail-plumed, avian, pattern-bodied, animal-human, snake-associated figure. This is the largest one you see in this figure. And several of them are obviously feminine. They have pendant labias, and 3 of the 4 also have concentric circle faces. All have avian feet with 3 or 4 toes. This panel is located in Little Pet, and it's heavily revarnished. It's the most difficult panel to photograph because it's so heavily revarnished. And I would estimate it's 5,000 to 7,000 years old at a minimum, and could in fact be considerably older. Here's a panel that's in a different location. We see the decorated animal human figures with these Elko series projectile points. And these points are enormous. We're talking 3 feet tall. The largest figure in this picture is about that same length. And this panel is located in Parish Gorge. I would estimate that, again, this particular panel, because it is a mixture of pattern-bodied and solid-bodied, probably dates to about 4,000 years ago, circa 2000 BC. These decorated and solid-bodied, characters are typically female. they're dominantly female, and this was a big surprise for us because the literature itself indicated that all of these figures were shamans and males. But upon close study, and I've been studying this for 4 years, both the women and the men that I show this and identified these characteristics do recognize that these are in fact females. Um, Often these figures sometimes have what's called the large headdresses, the hair bobs, with their hair tied up in this butterfly or squash blossom way, which is a way for the Hopi use this as a benchmark for the coming of age of their young women, which shows they are able to reproduce and able to marry. Well, the same set of figures represents those hair bobs and also show them actively menstruating. You see that thread of blood coming out of the base of these figures. Here's some more pictures, and these are all females. These are all some of the females from the Coso inventory. And when we've gone in there and calculated and reviewed a recent compendium of these figures that gave us a database of 450 individual figures that are culled from a sample of well over 1,000, I would say of the ones that we classified and were able to identify, I would say over 3 times the number of females occur compared to that of males. I'd estimate about 90 females to about 25 or less males in that particular inventory. So the physical manifestations of female snake-associated avian figures is really notable. This explosion of artistic elaboration is quite impressive and certainly is antecedent in a great deal of time with the snake divinities we find in Mesoamerica. But as we have said in a recent book that I published with Tirtha Mukhopadhyay as the senior author, we believe that snakes, these serpent figures, are a root image or a hallmark of the Uto-Aztecan people. And we could see them represented again and again and again throughout the iconography in rock art, in sculpture, in basketry, and in many other forms of artistic endeavor. Here we see the Hopi snake dance, which is a dance for abundance and for the coming of rain, and also to celebrate the renewal of time. And here's a picture of a Coso figure with quail plumes around his or her head and a snake, I believe, in his mouth. And I wanted to show that in comparison to the Hopi snake holders in their annual ceremony as well. And I believe that's it.
Alan, thank you so much. I think that you're not done though. We've got questions.
I know. Now we get to the good part, right?
Right. And I'm glad that you ended with the Portuguese bench panel there, because one of the questions that came up early on is that people are curious about how you're getting these amazing reproductions of the panels. That the Portuguese bench panel is not that easy to see. So how did you end up with this replica here?
A gentleman who I know very well, who I worked with on a number of research papers and publications. His name is Bernard Jones, and he's an artist. He worked professionally as an artist, but he's also a rock art scholar. And he pioneered a way to examine the rock art images and post-process and use various forms of resolution improvements. And then he does what's called pointillism. So he uses very, very small dots to represent the canvas, and then the images themselves are unpointed. And this particular image takes him, I don't know, 40 to 80 hours to produce. It's an unbelievable exercise. He doesn't think much of it. He says, "Oh, this is just something that I do. I really enjoy this. This would make me absolutely go crazy."
Sure,
Yeah, yeah.
sure.
But
Alan, while you
that's what he does. He enlarges it tremendously so he can see every nuance and detail on the original panels. He uses de-stretch and he uses every other means of post-processing and enhancing and pulling out what you really can't see or see very well in the original panel. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Ellen, while you were talking, I took the liberty of putting the photograph of Portuguese bench side by side with this reproduction. Do you mind if I share that so everybody
Oh
can
no, please do, please do.
Okay. Let me bring that up real quick and we'll get that presented. There we go. Sorry, guys, I'm clicking on too many things at once. One more time. There we go.
Will I be able to see it? Oh yeah, good.
Right. So there you'll see
Ah,
the
yeah,
left the photograph of the trip that
right.
Lindsay took, and then
Uh,
on the right the
Yeah.
drawing.
One of the things I did, of course, is immediately use de-stretch, and de-stretch allowed us to really pick up a lot of the less noticeable or notable elements on this panel. But also, if you have uh, occluded light that is from, covered up with either some sort of a cloud cover or using some sort of a canvas over it, it really helps bring out more of the panel. So it's a very poor photograph because there's very little cloud cover, and that makes it difficult to see.
Right.
Please go right ahead.
So you've got a couple of follow-up questions relating to this particular panel. Stephen Isaacson is interested in having you explain the center figure in the panel that shows a small human figure inside a larger hollow.
Yes, yes. Uh, I have never seen anywhere in the Cosos anything like that figure, in the sense that having a, a, a reduced figure, a tiny figure of a human inside of an animal like that. That's creative and that's new. But that figure, uh, most likely, uh, it either could be a mountain lion, but I don't think it is. The figure above it, the larger figure, is definitely a mountain lion, because when they render such figures, they always have very long tails. This one doesn't have quite the lengthy tail. It could be a coyote, but maybe it's still a mountain lion. Also, if you notice, the figure's hands are up in the air. That's called an adorant posture. And that's a visual shorthand for prayer, for supplication, for reverence, all those things. It's basically, for the last 2,000 years, been showing a connection between the celestial realm, the realm of divinity and creators, to the terrestrial realm, the commoner, from humankind to God and gods and goddesses. If that makes any sense, that is a very unique posture that occurs frequently in rock art. And in the literature, it's called an adorant posture.
Thank you for the new vocabulary. That's awesome. Joyce has a follow-up question also. She's looking at the figure of the snake in the middle of the panel. I think it's just down from where we see the footprint. And she's wondering,
Yes.
is that a plumed serpent, and is there a relationship of plumed serpent with the goddesses?
So we do have a plume serpent. That was that one that I showed you. That huge. I didn't tell you, but that picture in Little Pet goes for many meters long, and it does have quail plumes adorning its head. Here, I don't think that's what this one's showing. This little sort of thing that looks like a little bird is the visual shorthand in the Cosos for bighorn sheep. The way they render the bighorn sheep is with full front-facing bifurcated horns. Similar, see this over here? That's a classic Coso sheep one right here.
Over
So
on
it's
the left.
so it's a flat back navicular body, full front facing, with horns separated, the bifurcated horns. That is a unique aspect and a hallmark of Coso. And what the Coso people do, is just show the horns. And there's panels that show horns, horns, horns. The whole panel is covered with just pictures of the horns.
Okay, thank you.
Now it there is a connection. And this is really, was sort of troubling. I said, well, what does this have to do with bighorn sheep? Because bighorn sheep are supposedly, the be all and end all in the Cosos. And here's a panel with all kinds of other things, but not so many sheep. In Hopi land, when they have the new fire ceremony, which is this creation narrative, and it has to do with bringing back the sun after the winter solstice. That particular group that are sun watchers wear the bighorn sheep horns, and they dance the bighorn sheep dance. And this is part of the story of reconnecting with the universe and bringing in a balance to the universe, and continuing the abundance of flora and fauna. Go ahead.
I knew this was going to happen. All of a sudden, you've got lots and lots of questions that are piling up in here. A lot of
It's okay, Brent. Yeah. See if we can do it.
A lot of follow up with this same panel and this same conversation. Joyce wanted me to reiterate again. She says I should ask first if that's a plumed serpent, because it might be part of the figure seemingly beneath it. Could it be a snake?
Sure. Could be, yes.
Could it be a snake held in the mouth?
Yes. Yes, it could.
Right?
Absolutely. It could be a snake in the mouth, just like the Hopi snake ceremony, which again is this ceremony I'm alluding to, which is the new fire ceremony.
And then Mary Ray asks, are you suggesting that sacred imagery began in the Coso Range and then traveled south to what is now Mexico? Also, regarding the snakes, are there any plumed serpents, as are so often seen in Mesoamerica? I think you've kind of touched on that a little bit.
Yeah. In our book, which is called the Iconography of the Uto-Aztecan, we touch upon that issue, and we believe there is a distant connection. But what that connection is, I'm not sure. I don't think there was necessarily a physical connection, but somehow the iconography, the particular decorative way of rendering this imagery, or the particular emphasis on certain kinds of images, may have been, flowing from Coso to other areas.
So, Alan, can you talk a little bit about the significance of avian feet? Could it be sort of a shortcut? The hands are also sketched with 3 or more sticks for fingers.
Yes. So this avian element is found rarely. Birds are not really common in rock art, but in Coso they are. They do produce quail, and they have these avian figures. Now, the avian figures and the quail plumes are important. So quail have an odd way of being. We're looking at liminal creatures that live in two parts of the universe. We have a layered universe. It starts in the underworld, the terrestrial world, and the sky. So for the quail, we're talking about its habits and habitat. So with the quail mother and the quail kids are very prolific. There's a lot of a lot of them, so it has to do with fertility. But also when they're predated, an animal comes to hunt them or kill them, the mother feigns, sickness, and the little baby birds become catatonic, and they all look dead. You can pick them up with your hands. So you've got a life-death situation intermingling with this avian element. Now, as well, this avian element could indicate sort of this posture of these figures living in the heavens, and also, as a shaman does, flying to this celestial realm where the supramundane beings and deities live. Okay, enough.
Not enough, Alan. Come on. Lewis is asking, do you have any hypotheses as to the meaning of the female-male figure ratio that you mentioned?
Yes, yes, very much so. There seems to be a huge emphasis during this early time on the focus on femininity, and it's an earth mother. So if you go back to the Uto-Aztecan cosmology, it's a lunar earth mother. Why is it a lunar earth mother? Why is it a moon goddess? Because the sun is hot and strong and typically male, and the moon, it's at nighttime and it's cold and it's dark. Yet as you watch the moon go through its pattern of changing, it's as though a female is gestating and growing and becoming pregnant and giving birth. So it's the feminine moon and the masculine sun. So this lunar goddess, or this feminine earth mother, is what we're talking about here as the figure. The reason it's an earth mother is because when you look out on the cosmos, when you look out on the night sky, you see the celestial beings coming out of the earth, the stars, the moon, the sun, as though it was birthing these heavenly bodies. And so that gave rise to the feeling, or the notion that the earth is your mama, the mother.
Thank you, Alan. You've had a couple different people that are interested in knowing about the dating that you shared for the
Yes.
rock art. What are you basing the dating on?
So we have a tremendous amount of information about the dates now. We've looked at them from superimposition. We've looked at them by looking at the imagery and the styles and the types in association with single component sites that also have an association of what we call dates. They're obsidian dates that are temperature adjusted, and so we have the dates there. So on top, and also we have this depiction of projectile points, which are chronologically diagnostic. And in the western part of the Great Basin, we have the short chronology, so we know precisely what they date to. And the Coso people were nice enough to give us a diagnostic so we could tell how old they were. But all of that pales by comparison, because we also have a direct means of dating them now using portable XRF dating. And that's been done twice, early on and lately. There's a gentleman from Germany that's published four refereed papers that have appeared in scientific journals on his work, both in the Middle East and in the Great Basin American Southwest. And I had the good nature of him coming with me and dating all of these images in Coso land itself. And the dates are very reasonable. They're not in any way in misalignment with the chronology that we put together relating to the various styles and presence of various design elements. What's interesting is early on in the Newberry period, when we have those Elko series points, and in the Pinto period, we're dominated by women. As soon as we got the bow and arrow, and the depiction of hunting a bighorn with dogs, they're all men.
Interesting shift. Alan, Diana is asking if the glyphs that you were talking about are similar to the glyphs that are found near China Lake, California.
They are the ones. Yeah. It's China Lake is the place of Coso Rock Art, and it's the Coso Range rings China Lake. Now, within the north base of the China Lake Naval Weapons Center are found 80-90% of Coso Range rock art. So it's completely protected and ringed by one of the most secret places on Earth, and that's where we develop our weaponry to deal with some of our enemies and people who don't want us to be alive. Now, as well, there's another place on the edge of the weapons center. It's called Little Lake, and it's a closed, privately owned duck club, and it's a major site of Coso rock art as well. So that's really the only places you can see a real prolific nature or preponderance of Coso rock art. It does exist outside, but typically not as abundantly as it does within the base and within Little Lake.
So you've got a question from Mitch. He says, I certainly recognize the self-sacrifice of the individual Quetzalcoatl in the Aztec version of this story in the Legend of the Five Sons. Are there analogs among other known Uto-Aztecan peoples?
The Huichol. The Huichol have an identical creation narrative. And it's that this number 5, or the quinsunk element, is remarkably significant many Uto-Aztecan people, but especially with the Huichol and the Nahua. When I say quinsunk or fiveness, it has to do with the representation of encircled cross, which is called the Nahua Olin, or the other elements that we know of, and we see these 5 primordial pilgrims on this panel represented as anyways.
Thank you. Maritha has mostly a comment for you. Thank you, Alan, so much for identifying the figures as being female. It's been not so long ago that everything was identified through patriarchal eyes.
Amen.
The snake and bird goddesses are also predominant in European and Middle Eastern archaeology.
Yes, very, very predominant. And I didn't mean to go there. It wasn't my intention. I try to go where the data tells me, and that's what I've done for 50 years, and it sort of kept me busy.
Philip says, I've seen white shaman on Rio Grande. Any evidence of trade or exchange with the peoples in Coso?
I would say no. The Coso people certainly were distantly connected to the American Southwest, but I've never seen any southwestern pottery within the Coso Range itself or at archaeological sites there. I think that this design tradition and this ceremonialism might have been autochthonous, if you understand what that is. It would have been, birthed almost introspectively from this area, because nothing around Coso has any parallels. And Coso rock art itself and its representation and this ceremonialism, everything I've talked about, is a one-off, basically, until you get to the American Southwest or Mesoamerica. It's not characteristic of really anything much in the Great Basin, as I understand it.
So you've got a meaty question here that I will pose to you, but I'm guessing that you might want to have some time to think about this. So if this is one that you want to try and answer, then maybe give me more. I can email some information out
Sure.
to you. Paul Fostich is saying, your interpretations are intriguing and detailed, and you present confidently about the narratives. Given that there is little in the way of ethnographic analogy, can you further explicate your methodology and theoretical positioning that informs your interpretations? For example, how can we be certain that the plumes are quail plumes?
Yeah, I I've worked on that my whole life, so that's a very easy question actually for me. I spent 4 years working with the indigenous Kawayasu who actually occupy this region, and by working with them, I, as an archaeologist usually doesn't do, I started reading their sacred narratives, their mythology, and as I read their mythology, they have a very important and significant deity, a supramundane being named Yahwera. And Yahwera is the supernatural gamekeeper, the the master of the animals. And besides having a robust corpus of mythology and sacred narrative, they were nice enough to paint its picture on a rock. And that rock is known as Yahwera Anina, the home of Yahwera. And it is identified such by the ethnographers. That rock is limestone, it's split, it's echophonic. That picture I talked about in one of my articles has many characteristics similar, an analog for these Coso decorated animal human figures. And in this sacred narrative, this figure, this supramundane being, this animal master, animal mistress, it's both genders, by the way. The men see a female and the women see a male. Wears a quail plumed coat or dress, and even the Tabatalabo know of this figure, and they call it the parent or master of quail. Anyways, so there's a lot of ethnographic data that supports this that I've published over the last 50 years, and then also intermingling is just a tremendous variety of layered variety of data that all points to this rather remarkable reading of this panel and other panels and other data sets that all seem to point to the same connection. Go ahead.
So I'm going to put a pin in that because I have a related question, but I want to ask Veronica's question first. And that is back in reference, I think, to that Portuguese bench panel, which I can share again if you want me to bring it back. She's wondering about the figure on the bottom right that has branch-like arms.
Please.
Possibly with a snake. So let me share that again so that everybody can see the picture, and that might help you identify which one she's talking about.
Yeah.
I see it now.
So I didn't understand, and it's very important to understand why snakes. We think of snakes in our industrial perspective, Western Cartesian way, as bad things. And certainly they are apex predators and can kill human beings. But as well, they move along the ground in a circuitous manner, and they live in holes in the earth. When it rains, they come out of the earth. And so the Uto-Aztecan understanding is that the snakes bring the rain and the rain brings the plants. So again, the snakes are associated with rain and the growth of plants and fertility. Now, besides that, the Uto-Aztecans, the Nahua people, the Aztecs, looked at the human body and saw when they opened up a person, they had veins and arteries that all looked like snakes. So snakes became a vital, sort of an invigorating, life-giving element. What is the particular element that she's talking about?
I think down in the lower right, there's an anthropomorphic figure that's
As the hands out?
yeah. And it looks like there's a snake on the right-hand side of it.
I know what the snake is. I know there's a figure with hands out, and I see some sort of something that looks like a piece of vegetation. And they do depict vegetation in in Coso land, which is very, very rare. And so that's another reason that I think that these these female figures are associated with life-giving properties and the ability to reproduce and be fertile, but also with plants and animals. That's my take on that, but I really don't know.
Ah, for a time machine, right?
Yeah, yes, exactly.
So my
Now, one last thing, Oz. You see that funny little thing that looks like a pair of pliers up below that main figure's foot, below the bighorn sheep? Kind of looks like a keyhole.
yep.
I know what that is. You ready?
Are you going to tell us?
Yeah. That figure is reproduced all over the desert west, all over the Great Basin, and into on the plains and also into the American Southwest. It's a figure of the means by which they hunt big game. It's a drive line or a wing trap that's that's used to cordon off and capture bighorn sheep, uh, antelope, and even deer. And that particular type of entrapment technique was characteristic of these particular people.
It's
Interesting, huh?
very interesting. Absolutely. We could talk for hours just about that panel, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So the question that I said, put a pin in it and come back to, I think that you've got some people that are very interested in the Coso rock art and the things that you've been talking about. And so I'm going to ask you to talk about some resources that you would point them to. And then also, would you email them to me so that I can then email out? So you've mentioned a couple of books. Are there websites that we could go to? Are there movies to watch? What do you recommend?
So I tried to produce a movie. I had thought about doing that for many years, and then finally I did. Called Talking Stone. I have a award-winning cinematographer. It appeared on PBS, and you can buy that particular movie or download it for that matter on the Bradshaw Foundation. Also on the Bradshaw Foundation, um, I'm the individual that talks about Coso rock art. It's in what's called the American Archive. And so they profile me, but also uh, employ one of my seminal papers on Coso rock art. And it's included in great detail along with photographs on their website. Also, there's a podcast that I did probably 10, 15 years ago where they interview me and ask me all kinds of questions about Coso rock art. That's free, and you can listen to that. I think it runs for about a half an hour, maybe even an hour.
So, Alan, I just pasted the link to the Bradshaw Foundation in the chat, and
Yes.
I'll also send that out in that follow-up email so people have got that.
On academia.edu, you have to can join it. It doesn't cost anything. I have well over 100 my papers and articles and books, PowerPoint presentations, etc., and they're all free.
Wonderful. Alan, that takes us to just about 6 o'clock. I want to thank you very much for joining us tonight. I've been amazed to learn from you as we've been putting this together. So thank you for sharing with me also. We will follow this up for everyone with emails with all kinds of resources for you. Lindsay, thank you also for joining me, and Sarah in the back end running the Facebook live feed. I appreciate all of you. We will,
Should I mention my contact information or no?
please do, absolutely. How would you like
Yeah,
people to contact you?
you can call me. 805-312-2261. I'm happy to talk and listen.
22.
All, 805-312-2261. Also, you can contact me via email at Avram, Alan Victor Randall Ellen Mary, AVRAM 1952 at yahoo.com. I have a personal website, alangarfinkelgold.com. I also have a nonprofit group called the California Rock Art Foundation. And I have a podcast on rock art, the only one in the world. So I produce this podcast twice a month now. I have about 130 episodes. It's on the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Okay, and I will make sure that all of those are in that follow-up email. So you may have a very busy phone here in the next few days.
Well, God bless you. And all
All
the
right.
people all the people that chimed in. Thank you so much for your interest.
Absolutely. You're getting a lot of thank yous in the chat. If we left anything unanswered, I'll make sure that I follow up with Alan. Come see us again in September. We're going to be talking about a preserve that the Conservancy owns way on the other side of the country in New York. So Bill Engelbrecht with the Eaton Preserve. So thank you all for joining us. Alan, thank you for being here. Sarah and Lindsay, thank you for helping me out. Good night,
Thank you,
everybody.
Archaeological Conservancy. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.